So this next campaign we're going to talk about is a bit meta, given that we are on a webinar today. Before we dive into it, how does everyone feel about webinars after, I'm sure we've all been on a bunch in the past 2 years. So just throw one word in the chat. I want to get a read of people's feelings about webinars. I see one heart. Efficient, yes, agreed. Anyone feeling Zoom fatigue after all of this time? Yeah. All right. I'll wait another second. Too many. Yes. Tired. Yeah. So thank you for your honesty. And I was hoping there would be a range of responses because I can tell you I have felt all of the above over the past year. I did a quick calculation the other day. I have either hosted, produced, or attended about 30 webinars this past year. And I've seen a lot of them. So I've seen ones that were boring and ineffective, and I've seen ones that really knocked it out of the park. And at the end of the day, I have really fallen down on the side that webinars are one of the most effective B2B marketing channels that there is. And I am looking forward to doing them even, when we can return to in-person events. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why webinars still win, and you can see it up on the slide right now. So first of all, I think that, in the past 2 years, we've really thought of webinars as a replacement for in-person events because it was all that was available to us. But really, as we start to, hopefully, knock on wood, re-enter a world of in-person events, we have to think about them as two different marketing channels because they are quite different and they both serve different purposes. And so here's why webinars, I think, are still here to stay, and while you'll still get lots of success with them in 2022. So first of all, short time to results. One of our most successful webinars that we ran for a client from inception to execution was about 3 weeks, and we had hundreds of signups and attendees, and it was a huge success. That is by contrast to an event or a conference, which you can be preparing for months. Next, really a low dollar investment. A webinar subscription on Zoom is around $40 a month. Again, in comparison to in-person events where you are investing in travel and maybe catering and space reservation, it doesn't even compare. So we need to think about those as two different things. High demand volume. So on one hand, you could argue there are too many webinars. I get invited to them all the time. Why would I want to go? But if your content, which we'll talk about later, if your content is interesting, if it answers a question, if it solves a problem that your audience has, people will still come. Zoom fatigue is very much real, but it is not a match for an interesting topic that engages people, and they will sign up. That's why I hope all of you are here today. It's because you're interested in B2B marketing and you wanted some new ideas. So it's webinars can still draw a crowd. And so when you put all of this together, you're really looking at a very high ROI marketing channel if you do it correctly, right? The spend is very low, and the time investment is very low, all said and done as well. And you can draw hundreds of people, right? If it was that is not the case for in-person events. So again, webinars still win, and I think we're all gonna up our game in the next year. So to bring these things to life, I want to talk about a specific webinar that we ran for a client. This is actually almost a year ago at the beginning of 2021. It was for the fintech scale up that Netta mentioned already, TrueAccord, which is in the digital debt collection space. This webinar was kind of a primer on the topic of digital debt collection and featured Ohad Samet, who's the CEO and co-founder of TrueAccord, and Jan Hansen, who is a vice president at Klarna. And on the surface, this webinar, there was nothing special about it. It was a Zoom webinar, no bells and whistles, no animation or fancy things. It was just a Zoom webinar. So why was it so special? First of all, let's look at the results, what happened afterwards. So this webinar drew over 700 registrations. Out of that, we had about 300 attendees, which is about a 40% attendance rate, which in our business, that's a good attendance rate. From there, we got about over 15 sales opportunities. And I don't want to get too exact here with the number, but there were a bunch of closed deals as a result of people coming to this webinar and being interested in the content. So how did this happen? Why did this work? First of all, we had a really hot topic. So digital debt collection by itself, it's not a particularly sexy topic. It's not even particularly enticing. However, the fact that we invited a speaker from Klarna, which was, getting these headlines, here's some examples right here from Time, from CNBC, these big publications, BNPL was very much top of mind for our audience, even if they weren't in that space. And so they were drawn in just by the fact that, oh, maybe am not that interested in digital debt collection, but if Klarna has something to say about it, if this BNPL player has something to say about it, I'm actually interested. And so this is sort of association between something that's top of mind already and the topic that we really want to drive people towards, which is digital debt collection. Moreover, it wasn't just the topic, it was Klarna themselves. So this webinar was around the time that Klarna started doing their big Super Bowl ad push. I don't know if you all remember the Super Bowl commercial. Thought it was pretty great with Maya Rudolph, with 4 Maya Rudolphs, actually very amusing. So it was this like hot customer that was known beyond the world of fintech, right? So there was this sort of interest even from clients who were maybe in banking or another lending vertical that was kind of outside of the BNPL space. It was very hot, and we were latching on to that, riding the coattails of this PR wave that Klarna was having. And finally, it wasn't just that it was a hot customer, it was a hot customer who loved TrueAccord. So around the same time as well, Sebastian, the co-founder and CEO of Klarna, randomly tweeted, "We are so proud to work with TrueAccord. Putting technology to use for the people instead of against the people is the next generation of tech." So really having this happy customer who was in the news drove people in droves to this webinar. And I just want to take a second to say here that obviously these circumstances, there's a lot of luck involved here, right? So not everyone is going to, be associated with a Klarna who has a Super Bowl commercial and the CEO is tweeting. But the main idea here, I think, is applicable no matter what. In your product likely solves some sort of real world problem. So there's probably some degree of news around that, and tying your product and the problems that you solve to newsworthy events should be something that's applicable for everyone. Also, thinking about a hot topic, obviously Klarna and BNPL was a hot topic broadly, but you also need to think about a hot topic in terms of your audience. What is on their mind? What problems do they need to help solve? What can you do that is, really, really valuable to them? So those are the components of this content. What did we do once we had the content prepared? How did we get it out to people? So at this point, I want to do a quick poll. So I will launch this. Okay, so everyone take a guess. What channel do you think drove the most webinar registrations? Organic, social, paid ads, email, or other? All right. We'll give it a couple more seconds. All right, I think I've got most of your votes in. All right, well, here are the results of, all right, can everyone give me a thumbs up if you can see the results? Can you see the results of the poll? Yeah, great. Yeah, so good job to the 54% of you who guessed email, because that is exactly right. Ned, if you want to go to the next slide, and I will stop sharing this. All right, everyone can just X out of the poll window if you haven't already. Yeah, so the majority of our signups came from email, which was a free way of distributing this information. We sent it out to TrueAccord's email database, which is about 30,000 people. Paid ads, we got about half as much there, and that includes paid ads, included both ads in trade publications and also paid social. And the cost per lead for that was very costly. It was around, depending on the exact channel, was between $22 per lead and $200 per lead. So email, all it took was this hot content that we developed by what we talked about before, and we just sent it via email and people responded. A caveat here, which is very important, is that we had to have the email database to begin with, right? It's not going to work unless you have people to invite. And so we actually have some content on our blog at Blue Seedling about how to beef up your own email database, which is really, which is pretty simple at the end of the day, but that is worth doing before you really invest in any of these, because once you build that, you can distribute all kinds of juicy, great, useful content to your audience. So let's talk about, now that you know how we distributed this webinar, what happened afterwards. So the webinar went off without a hitch. We had a great crowd. And then afterwards, the wins just kind of kept coming. And here's what we did. we actually were able to translate the webinar transcript into a case study about TrueAccord's relationship with Klarna. And this was a huge win. And I don't know how many of you have experience doing case studies with clients. They can often turn into a really laborious process. Legal teams will get involved. There's a lot of, there's a lot of like precision, and a lot of leaders often have to be involved in crafting a case study. However, if you frame a case study as if you come to your client and you say, oh, we're going to repackage something you already said as a case study, it was a lot easier to get buy-in all of a sudden, because they already said, we were just quoting them, right? They already said what they said, and here we are, and we're just kind of transitioning it into a case study and into their digital debt collection journey in this case. Even beyond the case study, we took the webinar recording, we put it on TrueAccord's website, and we put a lead gen form on it, and we kept getting signups for it, months after it happened. It really became this evergreen piece of content that we use in email newsletters for months to come. We promoted them on our social media channels and in paid ads on social. And it really, there was a ton of juice that came out of this. And more so, above and beyond the actual things that we did, we created this relationship with Klarna from the marketing team's perspective, where we became a contact of Jan. There's our buddy Jan with the Aurora Borealis in the background of his Zoom window. And basically, because we had this great experience with him, months later, we were planning a digital summit for TrueAccord, and we thought he would be a great speaker. And we reached out, and he immediately said yes. And so creating one piece of webinar content with someone can really be the beginning of a beautiful relationship and getting them involved with your content for a long time to come. So let's zoom out again and look at how you can apply these playbooks and these tips to your startups. So first, a client webinar is the best webinar. Your clients, hopefully you have clients who want to rave about you, who are so excited to be working with you, and they are really your best advocates. So getting them in front of your audience can be incredibly powerful. Email marketing is really your best friend in driving registrations. Of course, as I said, that involves building your database. But once you do that, email is the fastest and freest way to get your content out there. A hot topic is always going to help you draw people. So what is the connection you have to some newsworthy event? What is happening in the world? What is happening seasonally? How can you use your sort of PR mind to think about how your product is related to something really newsworthy? Then after the webinar happens, how can you repackage it into a case study? How can you keep getting marketing wins out of that one event? And finally, how can you continue to repackage, use it on all of your different channels, make a really huge integrated marketing campaign, and make it an evergreen pillar of your marketing as opposed to just a one-off event.